All right, so last up is the Broncos, and they will be at Cincinnati, the perennial bad luck team of the NFL.
Yeah. I would be surprised if Manning doesn't give us, 35 or 40 points on that game.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think I don't know if he's ever lost against the Bengals. The Bengals organization right now, again, are not a terribly good team, and I don't think the Broncos should have any problem with this. I think this should be one of the give me games on the board for them. So,
well, and again, to me, the takeaway from this game will be whether or not they play down to their opponent or whether they play their game regardless of the opponent. And so, if they play their game, they're going to put in 35 or 40 points against what I don't remember where the Cincinnati is with their defense, but I think it should be fairly porous for them.
Yeah.
Now, another thing I'm going to be looking forward to is whether or not the Broncos defense can do what they ought to against a weak Cincinnati offense.
That is kind of the wild card with us, isn't it? Right?
It is. It is. So it's hard to tell whether we're talking about beginning of the season Broncos defense or the current Broncos defense. I'll say though that they're going to give up, say, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So I'll give them 21 points. I'll spot them 21.
So what's your final? 40 something.
Let's say 40 something to 21.
All right.
My math's a little hazy when you get up to those 40 numbers.
No. You know what? I'm going to go something pretty close to last week's. I agree with you. I think the offense, if they keep clicking, again, with football, it's any given Sunday. So every prognosticator has got to go on what they saw last week. Plus injury reports, that kind of thing. And based on the performance over the last few weeks, something similar, to what we did to New Orleans, 34-14. I'll give them, New Orleans is a great team. So,
yeah, I just realized I spotted more points for the Bengals than I did for New Orleans.
But the New Orleans is one-dimensional. I don't think the Bengals are quite caught in that trap. So I'm going to say 34-17. We'll keep it reasonably close to the other score.
34-17. All right.
So.
All right, well, let's talk about that Denver-San Diego game. I think you're going to be surprised here.
Oh.
I actually am going to call this as a close game.
Okay.
I'm going to call this a 28-24 victory for Denver.
Okay.
Now, the reason is that right now the failure in the of the rush is making Denver a monodimensional team.
Absolutely.
And I think that there's just enough mojo with San Diego to take advantage of that. They've got enough D to be able to punish the Broncos for being monodimensional.
Okay.
Also, last week, Carolina being able to shut down the Denver offense for nearly half the game raises some questions. What's going on there? And until the Broncos show me that they can, really play well again, I'm hedging a little bit on their production. The other side of it is that it seems like Phillip Rivers is always good for a pick six. And I fully expect the Denver D for one of those 4 touchdowns I'm predicting to be a defensive touchdown on a pick six from Rivers. I'm actually willing to put that in my prediction.
Okay.
That Denver D is going to come up with a pick six on Rivers.
It's funny, when you gave me that score, I was going to comment that, so you're going for the responsible Phillip Rivers score. But that's interesting that you're saying that the Denver D will shut him down enough that Rivers will still throw in 6, and they'll shut him down for the rest.
I gave San Diego 24 points. I think it's going to be 2 touchdowns, and the rest is going to be kicks.
Okay.
And that's it.
Well, continuing the harmony of the picks, I got the same concerns. Denver's offense in the last couple of weeks has shown the inability to run the ball. It makes Manning have to pass it all the time, and as great as a quarterback as Manning is, that does cause problems. And it's last week it made it hard for us against a pretty mediocre team. But again, this game, like last week's pick and the week before that, completely depends on Phillip Rivers. I believe that both teams are competitive against each other. These teams don't like each other.
Right.
You know, if
Boy, God knows that San Diego Chargers have ruined the Broncos' day so many times I can't count.
absolutely. So with that in mind, you know, if Phillip Rivers was a consistent quarterback,
Right.
the only way I could call this game would be, the home team's probably going to win this. But Phillip Rivers isn't a consistent quarterback, and he's the crazy X factor. So
Right.
if he's consistent, I think it'll be competitive. But I don't think he's going to be. Like you, I'm thinking, he's going to throw at least one pick that'll probably go back for a touchdown, or put the Broncos in a place to get 6 or 7 points. You know, and when that happens, that's a 14-point swing.
Right.
You lose your 7, and you give them 7. It's such an enormous. That's why turnovers are death to a team. I think Rivers will be inconsistent. I think he'll do the selfish thing that he always does. And I think it's going to be almost like a replay of last week's game for the Chargers. It'll be a back-and-forth game until the fourth quarter. Rivers will screw it up at some point, give up the 6
Right.
points or the turnover that basically lets Denver, move it down themselves for the touchdown or the field goal. And that'll put the game out of the reach for the Chargers, who seem now these days just to fall apart. As soon as Rivers starts to that first interception, the team doesn't seem interested in playing. And they don't even seem interested in playing when they're on the field in general. But once Rivers starts being Rivers, the team just deflates.
Yeah.
And because they don't have any, I don't think they trust him. They don't believe in him. And it's the same old for them. Imagine playing for a guy in a team sport. You're playing your best games, and especially on a team where a lot of the players are on the back ends of their careers, and they're seeing that window for the going in the deep into the playoffs getting smaller and smaller, and you do everything right.
Right.
And you see Phillip Rivers throw an interception. You're like, crap! There goes another game.
Right.
The bottom line for this game is that for the Chargers to have any chance at a playoff run at this point, they have to beat the Broncos. They lose both games to the Broncos, they're done.
They are.
It's both. So
And conversely, I mean, let's roll back the season a little bit. To me, that incredible, pounding that we got in the first half of the game against San Diego, followed by one of the greatest point turnarounds ever in NFL history,
crazy.
right?
Absolutely crazy. Yeah,
Exactly. So that was kind of a turnaround in the Broncos season. We were kind of wobbling along, and then that game, and boom, we've got a winning streak that we're piling up, and we're looking like one of the top 5 teams in the league.
Sure. Well, you know what? Actually, I never got to my pick.
Oh.
So I will pick the Denver Broncos to win 35-24. What was your pick?
28-24.
So we're still pretty close.
Right.
So
I mean, you're giving them another touchdown. I'm not willing to quite give them their normal 30 points this week.
Sure.
All right. Welcome to Sportishness.
Yep.
Episode 3.
Episode 3. Some good stuff going on this week, actually. A bunch of away games for us.
Yes.
So what do you want to start today?
Actually, why don't you kick off?
All right, I'll kick it off. So why don't we start off with the...
Although I do want to add, by the way, it is cold down here in Sportishness World Headquarters. We didn't pay the power bill this week, so...
Paper's expensive.
Yes, that's right. Anyway.
But you were representing this week.
Yes,
yeah, I think the only thing you're missing is like an orange shirt, but...
well, you ought to see my underwear.
No.
Okay,
Wow.
anyway.
Okay, moving on.
TMI.
All right, so I think we're going to kind of stick with the kind of our informal format that we've been working on the last few weeks. So that always starts us off with the last week results of week 10.
Right.
Our picks. So I think we're going to kind of break our whether we did a good pick or a bad pick into 3 categories. Yes, we were we were within a reasonable score, and we did pick the winner. And no, we didn't pick the winner, or our scores are completely borked, kind of like me on the or the middle categories, which I'm calling the meh category, in which, we might have picked the winner, but God, we got the scores just wrong. That's a stress to get over that one shot, Cameron. All right, so you picked 14-27, and I think so. let's start off with the Chiefs versus the Steelers. It was the last game played, but we kind of like doing this from the worst team to what we consider the best team. You picked 14-27, and I picked 3-31. I think we both overestimated the amount of offense the Steelers would put on the field. The actual score was 13-16.
Yeah.
So, and it was even before Roethlisberger got hurt. I mean, it was a pretty ugly game. That was given you were close. Yeah. I would think. I picked 3-31, and I'm going to call that a meh. I picked the winner, but I didn't pick the score.
Yeah, you know what? I really thought the Kansas City's. I thought Jamal Charles, who really I think was a centerpiece of this game.
Yeah, and you called that actually last week. You said that the running game was going to be a factor with Charles.
Well, and I also thought that Pittsburgh's weak rush defense wasn't going to really be able to contain him. I thought Charles was going to get another score on the board.
Okay,
but the bottom line is that he did help to get him into position, and so But as far as Pittsburgh's concerned, I mean, what the hell? 16 points? I don't care that Roethlisberger. In every phase of the game, Pittsburgh is a better team. So how they only mustered 16 points? Were they looking past Kansas City, thinking that they already had it in the bag?
Well, suppose that was the kind of the theme of the week from the mass media, from the press. From the liberal media.
The liberal mass media.
The liberal mass sports media. So the press basically was saying, hey, the danger here is Pittsburgh's going to look right past the worst team in the league. Pittsburgh kept saying, no, we're not going to do that. But this, I think, is classic Steelers football, in which the offense is not 100% consistent game to game, but it's the defense that for the Steelers traditionally has won games for them. In the long haul. And I think that's kind of what happened here. And in fact, it was. They got that late interception, and that basically sealed the win for them.
The thing about it is that I got to ask myself, with Kansas City being so close, and if they had committed a few less penalties, if they had, they might have been able to close the deal. Yeah. I mean, it was just right on the edge. And Matt Castle looked like he made some critical mistakes, but he also looked like a different quarterback. He looked like he had some, motivation. He was running the ball, looking Tebow-ish.
Remember, they were up 10-0.
Yeah.
That was pretty much their game, but
right.
Yeah, pretty early on. I mean, the Steelers had to come back. So with KC, I think it was still the tale of the same old Kansas City. Yeah. I think you could say the highlights for Kansas City: Jamal Charles, 100 yards.
Yeah,
and that's great considering everybody knows that's all they really got on the board. They've got quarterback issues. So when everybody knows you're reasonably mostly one-dimensional, and you have to come out and run it, and you still get 100 yards out of your back, it's still a pretty decent thing. I hate to say it, another positive for Kansas City is only one turnover. Now, it was a critical one that lost them the game, but for KC, that's a change of pace. They've been really sloppy with the ball.
Absolutely. I really think that there were a lot of positives for Kansas City. Yeah. I mean, for being a loss, it was one of those things where, they got it to overtime. If they hadn't had that one, turnover in overtime, it would have been theirs. I mean, and, for Pittsburgh, well, that raises a lot of questions about what kind of contender they are. I mean, to have it come down to be this close against the worst team in the league. I mean... And of course, Roethlisberger going out in the middle of the game. Luckily, he has a sprained shoulder, so, but...
Well, it puts him in a bad place right now. You're looking ahead to the playoffs. They're, I think, 5 or 6. They're fighting for a wild card seed. Right. And, they're not in a position right now to win their division.
Right.
So it's getting tight for them. And some of the teams in front of them have already beaten them, like us. Not that we're going to lose our division, but if it fell apart on us, and it was a tiebreaker, we still beat the Steelers. So I think this was a game I think they really had to have. They blew. I don't say blew. They lost the tight game.
Right.
And, it's not that happens in the NFL all the time. On the bad side for Kansas City, I think it's the same old Kansas City. Lots of penalties. Not as much as last week. Last week was just ludicrous. But, still 6 penalties. That's drive killing. And 2 on 13 on third downs. You and I both talked about this earlier. 2 of 13 on third downs is not how to win games. That's how
No.
your score is going to be low, and they lost. And the penalties lead to 3rd and longs. And when you got a quarterback who really can't pass out of that consistently, your drives are going to stall and you're not going to score a lot of points.
All right, so next game. Let's talk about the Oakland-Baltimore game.
Oh, my God.
Okay, now, first off,
Sorry.
I think
wait, I'm not done.
You're not done laughing yet. Okay,
well, I'm up.
That ended up being a 20-55 blowout, although I'm going to hang a Barry Bonds asterisk on that. I called it at 21-24, so I wasn't that off on Oakland, but good Lord, Baltimore. Where the hell did they get 55 points of offense? I mean, the thing about it is that half a dozen pundits talked about how Baltimore in their last 5 wins had combined only managed a 23-point surplus in 5 games.
Yeah, that's true.
So how do they manage a 25-point blowout?
And just so we can finish the board up here, I called 6-27.
6, yeah. Okay.
So you called 21-24. I called 6-27. We did call the winners, but we didn't even get close on points. I think we both get a meh. It's unfortunate, but there it is. So getting back to how did Baltimore rack up some points? It's Joe Flacco. He's such an inconsistent quarterback. Speaking of inconsistency, the guy claims he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and you'll see him one game, it's like, man, he's really good. He can drop the ball anywhere. And the next game, he can't throw it to anyone. So Joe Flacco really kicked out. Now, for that game, I said Ray Rice was going to be the factor, that Oakland's running defense couldn't stop anybody. But it turned out nobody could run in that game. No. And Ray Rice wasn't a factor, and so it just turned into this huge passing, every third play was the bomb kind of situation. Interestingly enough, in the press, Flacco's getting a lot of credit for the win, but Palmer had a good game. And if you're going to say anything good about Oakland in this game, you can say, hey, Palmer had a good game. He didn't throw to a lot of, there wasn't he's throwing to where the receiver should be as opposed to where he is. That didn't really happen a lot that game. Right. So I think that's something they can build on. But, to flip it over, in my mind, this was the same old Oakland again.
Well,
good.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, we've got, statistically, we've got a thing where, Oakland had 19 first down. Baltimore had 22. Third down conversions, they were about the same, which was kind of, so-so. 8 and 18 for Oakland, 5 and 12 for Baltimore. Passing yards, they were virtually the same, 350 and 41. Rushing, 72 and 78. Turnover, well, okay. And then a really bizarre thing is time of possession. Oakland had 33 minutes of time of possession. Baltimore had 26 minutes of time of possession. Now, so where did it fall apart? Well, where it fell apart is their sloppiness. Yep. I mean, good God, 10 penalties for 105 yards. There's no team in the league that can win a game with 10 penalties.
We can't win it consistently. I completely agree. And we've talked about this. Well, this will be the third week. It's an institutional problem with the Raiders. Right. It's kept them from having success, or even the chance of success, year after year after year, all the way from since John Madden left the team. Right. They just have to fix that, or they won't be competitive. Another stat that popped up for me, after the game was they were in the red zone 3 times. No touchdowns. You can't win football games in that situation. And Baltimore was much better there. Right. So.
Well, and then, of course, there are 3 turnovers.
Yes, that doesn't help you.
2 fumbles and an interception. And, especially, I mean, Baltimore's a team where you expect to lose the ball. I mean, it's been one of their specialties for, going on a decade.
Yeah, their defense
strip
is
balls
sure.
and intercept. But, man, Oakland got owned on that.
They couldn't protect Palmer, 3 sacks. Right. And so I just wrote down my notes, same old Oakland. Right. What are you going to do? I don't know if we have to spend much more time on this game. And that was, if you're a Baltimore fan, that was great. If you're an Oakland Raiders fan, well, it's just more of the same. Right. We didn't expect them to win. And the fact that they lost by a mile, it really doesn't change my opinion of either team. Baltimore's still streaky. Oakland is just still bad from the fundamentals perspective. Chargers and Bucks. And this game was kind of back and forth. You had called it with 34-37. Right. And I had called it 23-21. And this is actually the first time that we've disagreed on a pick for the winner. Right. And the final score was 24-34. So you actually picked the winner, and you were actually pretty close on points. That was a very impressive pick. I picked it backwards and had the wrong number of points. So
I actually thought that it was going to be almost a replay of the Oakland-Tampa Bay game, but I thought that Phillip Rivers would have his pride in the game, would have his back up, and really be trying to throw a lot more touchdowns. I'm surprised that they were contained at only 24 points.
We talked about that last week, actually. And again, this is just like Oakland. This is something we've been talking about for 3 weeks now, which is the consistency of Phillip Rivers, the maturity of Phillip Rivers, to do the right thing on the field.
Right.
And now we've kind of grouped him in a class of quarterbacks like Tony Romo, who just, if they play their game, they're very good players, but they're not disciplined enough to play consistently good games. So this was a game where I bet that Phillip Rivers, with their back to the wall as far as standings, would finally play a consistent game, and he didn't, and that flipped the pick right into your lap. So I felt that this game was actually really back and forth. Either team could have won this game, and it was a tough fought game. And actually, our picks kind of reflect that. I gave him a 2-point win, or for the Chargers, and you gave the Bucs a 3-point win. Mm-hmm. So we felt it was going to be a tight game, and it was all the way down. Teams, they swapped the lead a couple times, but once again, this game hinged on Phillip Rivers.
Yeah,
and immature play. He threw that first interception in the fourth quarter that was returned for the touchdown that gave the Bucs a 10-point lead. That was the winning score. They never came back from that.
In fact, again, let's talk about these statistics, because this has really been the story of this week for me. First downs. San Diego had 23 first downs to Tampa Bay's 12.
23 first downs in a game where you get, on the average somewhere between 50 and 60-ish offensive series or plays.
Uh-huh. That's a crazy good day,
Sure.
Third downs. We've got 10 for 15 on third downs. A 2/3 conversion rate on third downs is a great day for any team.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And, Tampa Bay, 3 for 9. Passing yards. Phillip Rivers, 323 yards to Tampa Bay's 205. Rushing yards, 103 to 74. 100 yards rushing is a decent day for an NFL football team.
Absolutely.
And time of possession. This is crazy. 36 minutes and 41 seconds of time of possession for San Diego, and only 23 minutes and 19 seconds for Tampa Bay. So you go, what the hell?
Right.
How did San Diego not win this game? And you know what? Here it is. Turnovers. 2 interceptions. You know what? Mr. Rivers, I'm going to call you Mr. Rivers just to be respectful, but you really got to realize that every time you point the finger at somebody, you got 3 more pointing back at yourself. Those 2 interceptions were the difference in the game.
Yeah, that was absolutely it. I'll give the Bucs all due credit. They have shown themselves to be a tenacious team. I'm not sure, how far they're going to move along in the NFC South. Listen to this quote, and this is Phillip Rivers, who's been in the league a long time now. This is not like, hey, this is a first or second year quarterback.
This is not like Dalton or somebody.
Yeah, no, this is like somebody who should know better. After the game, Rivers said to the press, "It's a humbling game because it shows how essentially one play, can ruin a game. We killed ourselves on the interception for a touchdown. We were rolling pretty good for most of the game." First off, the imperial use of the we.
Right.
I don't like that in any sport. As an athlete, it was a we when something good happened. When I screwed up, it was I.
Right.
There was no we in that interception that lost in the game. That was Phillip Rivers.
The George Carlin rule applies.
Which is?
Your shite, my stuff.
Oh yeah, yes, exactly. So, every professional player in the football league goes to a media training class,
right?
Both from the league's perspective, and the team has their own set of guidelines about what you can and can't say to the press. But generally, you don't use the we on when I screw up. That wasn't like a blocking failure. That was Phillip Rivers sliding out of bounds, seeing a receiver downfield, and as he's running out of bounds, throwing that ball. It's only one place that ball can go. He's not going to throw it to 3/4 of the field. Of course, all the defenders are sliding along that spot. Intercepted, pick 6, 83-yard return, bomb, the game is over.
Right.
Guess what? That happened last week. Rivers threw the interception in the end zone. It wasn't returned, but basically that was what was going to turn that game around for him, and he screwed it up again.
It's an issue of judgment, and you're right. If he were a first, second, third year quarterback, you could say something about his inexperience, getting juiced up on adrenaline, making bad choices,
Sure.
right? But he's not that. He is a veteran quarterback. He ought to know better. Particularly, he ought to know better given the number of times he's done it.
Right.
There's a highlight reel that's probably 2 hours long of him throwing exactly that kind of stupid interception.
Yeah, and again, I'll compare him to Tommy Romo. The quarterback giveth and the quarterback taketh away. When they're on, they win games for their team. When they're off, they screw it up. But they're inconsistent so much that neither team has any consistency year by year. The only reason that the Chargers make it to the playoffs as much as they have is because the Broncos always fall apart at the end of the season. From the Mike Shanahan era to, well, until the first year of John Fox.
Right.
So they're in a weak division, and they've been lucky. But the reality is if they were playing in a tougher division, you wouldn't see them anywhere.
Right. If they were NFC East or North.
Yeah, that was...
Sorry, NFC North.
Yeah. They'd be doomed. They'd be out. Yeah, they'd be out in a second. So, again, hey, another game lost by Phillip Rivers.
Right.
Yay. He wins games, but the problem is that you got a quarterback who wins 3 out of 4 games. Just statistically, you're never going to make it to the Super Bowl.
Right.
Because one of those losses will be in the playoffs.
Right.
That's kind of a dumb way of putting it, but that's...
So, yeah, just to be, consistent, from one week to the next, I'm more of a Carson Palmer fan than I am a Phillip Rivers fan, because while Palmer may not have the skill, he doesn't screw up the same way that Phillip Rivers does. When you look at the undisciplined play of Oakland, it really has to do. It's spread around. I mean, there are many hands making all those penalties and creating turnovers. It's not just Carson Palmer. But you know what? This game for San Diego, I got to lay really the bulk of it right at Phillip Rivers' feet.
I agree completely. It's selfish play. In a team sport, when a single player does the wrong thing and does it not by accident, but does it knowingly, hey, I'm a running back. I'm not carrying the ball high. I'm not shifting to my offhand. Quarterback's throwing passes into places where that's the only place the ball can go. Mm-hmm. That's selfish play, and if it happens even once a game, for a player, it's a bad thing. It can cost teams games. Wide receivers who short arm balls, quarterbacks who throw, Cam Newton, I'm being sacked, so I'm going to just try throwing the ball out. Well, guess what?
Right.
It's the throw's going to have no power. People are going to jump routes. That kind of play kills teams. That's where the team element falls apart, and it's just you got to get the guy in hand.
Well, now, speaking of Cam Newton, we ought to shift over to Denver.
Okay.
Boy, what an interesting game that was.
Yeah, it was.
It was disappointingly interesting, let me just say. Okay, so final score was 36-14. I called it at 35-20. John called it at 34-17. Now, I think we both converged on the Broncos score because you know what? Bottom line is that Manning's Broncos have been pretty consistent about knocking in low 30-point totals. Yeah. Except for that Atlanta Falcons
27.
game. Yeah, exactly.
The one exception to the rule.
So, it's pretty much, it's almost not even a pick to say, okay, they're going to do, 31, 35, something like that.
So we both got that one.
Right.
We were really close. I mean, that was good.
The 20 I picked and the 17 you picked, I mean, I consider those to be, pretty good, solid picks there.
Sure.
I think we overestimated, I feel like I seriously overestimated the capability of Carolina. But you know what? Even though this is a win, and even though it's a win roughly in the shape that we were thinking of in terms of the point spread,
right?
My overwhelming biggest concern is the fact that the Broncos went from 1 minute and 32 seconds left in the first to basically 14 minute at the 14 minute and 17 second mark in the fourth without an offensive score, and they didn't get a touchdown until there was only 3 minutes left in the fourth. So basically, the Broncos got shut down offensively by Carolina, and that's a problem.
It was.
That's a real problem.
I think we're going to talk about this in a second, but it's kind of a theme that we've been seeing over the last 2 weeks with the Broncos where they're having problems running the ball. And if that really should not be happening with a Peyton Manning offense, because Manning's passing ability should drive the linebackers out of run protection.
Yes.
Should drive them far enough off the line where the running game can pick up 3, 4, 5 yards consistently when they need those yards.
Yeah, the running. I mean, boy, McGahee was silent again. And we're talking about silent in a way that he was being, given the ball, but he was being cut down in the backfield on a regular basis.
Sure.
And, something's getting into his head, because I saw him so many times approach the line of scrimmage with that stutter step that guys have when they're just not confident on what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I also have questions about the offensive line's ability to, open up lanes for McGahee to run. But there's basically, as you mentioned, you've got a Peyton Manning pass-heavy offense that should be spreading the field defensively.
Absolutely.
And it's not. For some reason, teams are starting to be able to cue off on where those running plays are coming from.
They are getting personnel reasonably tight to the line of scrimmage.
The offensive line, in my opinion, is not opening up the lanes they should, and McGahee is not looking like the one-cut downhill running warrior with churning legs that I love.
And I think that right there is really the problem. That has been the Denver's running off philosophy, all the way back to the playoff and Super Bowl years, is one cut and go downhill. Don't spend a lot of time, because zone blocking assignments back in the Shanahan era didn't really allow for a lot of time. So McGahee right now is one of those gap runners. He's bouncing along the gaps, trying to find his spot to go through. Where McGahee traditionally, back with the Steelers and with us, he would just, there's a linebacker in the gap, fine, I'll drive him for the 3 or 4 yards and wear out the offense. And he's really playing that little tenderfoot game of, I'm gonna dance around for a bit, shift around, see if I can find if some place that's open and go through. Modern NFL doesn't really allow for that very much.
No, it doesn't. In fact, it could be entirely, McGahee's doing, because, of course, these lanes don't stay open very long. They're open a quarter of a second, half a second, right? And if he's stutter stepping his way to the line of scrimmage, that could be enough for, the Red Sea to collapse back, on the Pharaoh's people. Yeah, I know. Long way to go for the...
That was a great one, though. Yeah. That's awesome.
But that's a real problem. The other thing, too, is I think that they're using him too much. I think they're using McGahee too much.
I agree. Well, I talked about last week they should put Hillman in more. And they put him in for 5 plays, and he averaged a total of 5 yards. Actually, one of those plays was for 5 yards, the touchdown play. So basically, one run, he got 5 yards. The other 4, average 0.
Which is one of the reasons why I have some question, actually, about what the offense.
Yeah, when you switch, like I said last week, why don't you switch the running back and try for speed?
Right.
See if that's the problem, because it happens sometimes. You're like, this guy's getting nothing. You switch the other guy, and bam, it's a 100-yard game for the second, the second tailback. That did not happen here, and so now I'm starting to lean a little bit more towards where you're at, where the offensive line is simply not getting upfield to that second level, getting those blocks on the linebackers that springs out the running back. One thing I will say about the running game is, even though it wasn't working for the Broncos this time, with the play actions, which Manning was doing brilliantly. He's not really known for being a really good play action kind of guy, as far as really hiding it well, or really selling it well.
But you know what? There was a play like in the third where I remember when we were watching it, you made a comment about, good Lord, I thought that the running back had the.
Yeah, I was like, I think even the camera started to follow that. And that's a rare thing. When you fool the cameramen who are brilliant at their job, it's like, oh. But the play action plays did drive the linebackers in a bit. They were a little too gritty on the run. So, in spite of the fact that we didn't have much of a running game, it did give us some of the ability to do play action passes to get us yards. But the lack of the running game really ended up burning us. Yeah. Because we relied on Manning. It put us in a lot of third and long situations. And what do we end up covering? Like 3 of 13 third downs?
Yeah. I mean, how we won this game with 3 third down conversions, I really don't know. I mean, well, actually, I do know. I mean, it's the fact that they were able to get a touchdown out of special teams and a touchdown out of the defense.
One thing that the Denver defense did again, it seemed like, especially in that first drive, is it looked like they came out to play the wrong team again.
Yeah, their defense, they had the wrong defensive sets.
So I'm not like, is it like the week before playbook or whatever? They make great adjustments, but it seems like every week the opening drive or two, the other team just marches down the field. Sometimes it takes them a half to catch up to what team they're playing.
I would say actually that last week was the first time that they had 4 quarters of football where it seemed like the defense was ready in all 4 quarters. This week it seemed they were back to having the wrong set. And again, it's a mystery. I mean, Jack Del Rio is a good coach. I mean, when he got his head coaching gig. His team, while struggling a bit, was the number 1 defense.
Again, this is a metagame, and these are the things you'll never know because these are the secrets you just can't let anybody know, or they become ineffective. So, conspiracy theory: does Jack Del Rio come out and play for a certain number of plays? Has his defense play in very stock, basic formations? Lets the other side's offense think, this is going to be pretty easy, or we can run these kinds of plays, and they just changes it up. Is that going on purpose? Because if so, you're a genius. But if this is, we had the wrong playbook, or we didn't look at the right game film, or other teams are used to playing Jack Del Rio by now, and they know what he's going to do, and he's having to make mad adjustments in the game, that needs to be taken care of during the week. That needs to be taken care of during the coaches' meeting, and when they're assembling what kind of defense they're going to put together. So either he's a genius or an idiot.
Well, you know what? If he's a genius, then he would be a genius on the scale of like a Belichick on the defensive side of the ball. To game the game of the game with the game. Yes. Until you're down to the little China doll or the little Russian doll that's about that big.
Yeah.
That's the game that they're playing.
Actually, that's I kind of consider that the play of the game. Like with the Broncos, I've been kind of like watching for what's the thing that defined that game.
Right.
This is what I consider almost the perfect scoring hat trick. The only thing they didn't do was a 2-point conversion on a touchdown. They scored they start with a passing touchdown, a rushing touchdown, an interception for a touchdown, a special teams touchdown, a safety, field goals, 2 of those.
Right.
The only thing we did, and of course the point after, the only thing we didn't do last week, and you disappointed me again, Broncos, was the 2-point conversion after a touchdown. I mean, we scored almost every possible way there was to score in a football game, which is pretty rare.
Your lack of faith disturbs me.
So how did we win this game? As they like to, coaches like to say, we want to play well in all 3 phases. We played well in all 3 phases. Should you whip out the song now? The special team song for Holiday?
Holiday! Oh, boy. Yeah, I kept singing that over and over again.
So, I think if you step back from the game, you say, well, how did we win this game? It wasn't our offense. They drove in for, 2 scores and 2 field goals. Those are good points. But where we won the game was defense, and the fact that every time we got the ball on special teams, Holiday was doing something with it. And they either got his good field position, or on that one play, he broke it for the not touchdown, as I'm going to call it, the touchdown that really should never have been. But except for his stupidity, that was 7 points for us. The defense. The defense beat the crap out of Cam Newton. I saw on ESPN.com that every time that he dropped back, he was harassed 42% of the time.
Right. Yeah.
Either hit, sacked, or under duress. We sacked him 7 times. That's insane. The offensive line of the Panthers just could not hold off our base rush. Mm-hmm. At one point, we were watching the game. We paused the play, and it was just standard play. I think the Broncos brought 4. They brought the regular 3, and they brought Von Miller or somebody in on the edge. So 4 guys rushing 5. All 4 of the Panthers were closer to the line of scrimmage than the Denver defense, which was closer to the quarterback.
Right.
They just blew, literally every player beat their assignment, and then they just humiliated the Panthers, the front 5.
And I made this remark during the game. It reminded me of that game last year where Jay Cutler got sacked 7, 8, 9 games.
70 times. I don't know. It was ridiculous. He was on his back a lot. That was a bad game for the Bears.
Yeah. I mean, the defense. But you know what? As good as they were doing on rush on the passer, of collapsing that pocket, they still were miserable on rush defense and still miserable on. Do you remember that there were a couple of screenplays in that game? And Carolina just owned our defense on the screenplay.
They did. I think that was the Denver, teams will run the screen to slow down rushing defenses. We were being hyper aggressive, and the screen it tends to have success against that. But after a while, you just got to cue on that. You just got to go to the line of scrimmage as a defense and say, the screen is a real potential. One chance in 5 they're going to be running a screen. So let's keep an eye out for that. And if you run right by the guy that's supposed to be blocking you, you might want to just kind of keep an eye on him, make sure he's not getting out in the flat for a screen pass. Yeah, they burn us on the screen over and over and over again. There's one part, as far as the defense, Cam Newton, we talked about this last week, that Cam Newton is a young quarterback. He's still pretty excitable and emotional in games, and that's one of the things when we were making these calls, whether we're going to get good Cam Newton or bad Cam Newton.
Right.
Well, I'm going to cut him more slack. He's a younger quarterback, and he's not been in the league in a long time. But there were some selfish plays that he threw an interception while basically being drugged down to the ground. That was just a give-me pick for an interception. If you're going to throw a pick, at least throw it in the middle of the field where the rest of your players might be able to shut down the run back. You throw it out to the corner there, out to the edges of the field. There's nobody between that guy and the end zone. It's not right. You're not going to be able to stop him. But we beat up Cam Newton so bad. I remember one time at the third quarter, they were showing him walking off the field, and he looked like he was 60 years old. He was hobbling. His head was down. I mean, he looked like he'd been beaten up, and he had been.
Mm-hmm. Two other things actually I'd like to say about this game. One is that I was really surprised by how the entire Broncos receiving corps was having an off day. I think I counted Decker having 3 drop passes that on any other game I would have expected him to reel in. Thomas, I think, dropped two passes that he should have had, and the tight ends, they were quiet.
Sure.
I think there was one really kind of important reception from Dreesen, and Tammy was just I don't know. I don't even remember his name being called. So that's one thing. The other thing is going back to the running game. I really think that no matter what, they need to start involving Hillman and Ball more. And going back to the whole fullback business, it might actually be a thing to do. If I were John Fox, which is a completely useless statement, but if I were John Fox, something I would try would be a thing where I would bring in McGahee and Hillman or McGahee and Ball, and with the full intention that their primary role of Hillman or Ball would be to run basically a fullback role, but with the option, of course, for
either one to actually get the ball.
Exactly.
Sure.
And I think that might start opening up some space. Plus, it would get them some reps. I mean, keep in mind, I can't remember if it was Hillman or Ball, but one of those two was drafted this year. I mean, we spent a draft pick to pick one of those guys up. So the thing about it is, if we believed in them that much, we should be getting them the reps on the field.
Fair enough. And from the metagame perspective, like last week where they lined up in there was a 3rd and short situation, but they lined up with a passing package and then they ran out of it, and they got the first down, ultimately helped them win the game. And from the metagame perspective, you start loading up with what looks like to be runs, and then you pass out of it.
Right.
It's Peyton Manning.
Well, and the other thing too is that for all the the criticism we've given to McGahee, the bottom line is he has been a great receiver.
He's done, yeah. He's.
I mean, he is great in the flat. He is great for reeling off another 5 yards after a short little dump catch over the line.
He's been an excellent outlet receiver, and in the modern NFL, the tailback has to be able to catch the ball in the flat. He's got to be the outlet guy. He's got to be able to run the ball. He's got to be able to pass block. And I think he did all 3 pretty well. So I guess the last thing probably to talk about in the Broncos game is that Dumerville is questionable for next week, and that will potentially hurt us. So they're not 100% sure if he's going to play right now. He's listed with the big Q. Hopefully he'll be out on the field. No, but that'll help us.
I don't necessarily see Dumerville being injured as a bad thing. I think the Broncos' defense has come to rely a little bit too much on their 1-2 punch of Von Miller and Dumerville. And I think that it may actually improve their rush defense if Dumerville is out, because the line is not going to be counting on one of their 2 star linebackers being back there to save the bacon.
I think, that's the Denver defense actually has shown a remarkable ability to adjust to the dog walking over our head. Well, we might actually leave that in because that's kind of funny.
That is kind of funny.
Anyway, I don't know if you could pick that up. Anyway, so The Denver defense has shown a good ability to adjust to people being out a lot. And we've talked about this for the last couple of weeks about people substituting in, when Porter's hurt, Dumerville's hurt, these kinds of things. And that's great. Obviously you want all your players playing, but they have been pretty resilient about that. So
there's some depth.
There is some depth there, and that's a great thing. So Week 11 AFC picks, and this week we only have 3 games to do because 2 of the division teams are playing each other.
That's right, the Broncos and San Diego.
So, and actually that's something we noticed or looked at right before the show was, at this point in the schedule, the back half of the schedule, our division ends up playing itself or playing teams in its division quite a bit. The Broncos still have 4 games to do.
Right.
The Chargers still have 2 games to do. The Raiders and the Chiefs all have 3 games.
Right.
What's left of the schedule. So we're going to see a lot of each other, and this actually is an opportunity for the teams technically in contention maybe to make a move. I don't think it's happening.
Technically in contention, yes.
Yes,
technically in contention.
Nobody's eliminated yet. So
really, the bad news is though for San Diego. I mean, they've only got 2 games left, division games left, and if San Diego does what we expect them to,
sure,
then they're pretty much out of the playoffs.
Yeah. Let's start with the Chiefs and the Bengals. We'll start from the bottom, work our way up. So I don't think this one's going to be a mystery. Actually, this is a tale of 2 teams that are on completely different trajectories. We didn't think much of the Bengals 2 weeks ago,
right,
but they have played their hearts out, and they are actually playing very good football right now.
Well, I mean, they just took apart the Giants. So.
Yeah, they humiliated the Giants. They're playing well on both sides of the ball. Right now, they look bad at the start of the season. They're looking very good right now. The Chiefs have fallen to the bottom. I don't think there's a lot of mystery here. I mean, the Chiefs did play a tough game against the Steelers, but
they did.
The same old problems. Penalties, inability to convert third downs, a quarterback who the coaching staff doesn't trust to pass the ball.
Right.
The only bright spot they have is Jamal Charles, and again, once you're one-dimensional either way, it's easy for teams to load up on you. So I don't spend a lot of time on this pick personally. I am going to say Bengals 27-13.
27-13. Okay. Wow. We're pretty close on this. I'm saying that Kansas City is going to be able to net 16. I'm thinking that they're going to get at least a touchdown out of Jamal Charles, and that he'll be able to drag them close enough to be able to get some kicks.
So you see you're calling it 27-16?
I'm saying 28-16.
28-16.
Yeah, okay. I see Cincinnati being able to drill in for 4 touchdowns.
Okay, fair enough.
And the real thing is Jamal Charles against the 20th ranked rush defense. I mean, okay, of course that's compiled up for the season. I think that Cincinnati's rush defense has been better, but still they're 20th ranked. And Dalton is going against the 8th pass defense, which is kind of surprising that Kansas City is the number 8 pass defense. It's not all bad news for Kansas City.
Right.
But Dalton, you know what? I have gained a lot of respect for Dalton. Let's talk about Oakland and New Orleans.
Okay.
Now, of course, New Orleans managed to knock off the lone unbeaten team, the Atlanta Falcons. And, I have been impressed with the Atlanta Falcons, but there has been this Barry Bonds asterisk hanging in the back of my head. Are they for real? Could they carry us through, a 16-0 season? And the answer is no. They are vulnerable. And in fact, their vulnerability seemed to be their own arrogance, which the New Orleans and Drew Brees, man, Drew Brees is not going to let somebody be more arrogant than him.
Sure.
So, as far as this game's concerned, I see New Orleans knocking in 42 solid points.
Okay.
And I see Oakland putting in 24. Now, the thing about it is that I think that there's an opportunity for Oakland to expose some weaknesses on the New Orleans team. I don't think the game's really going to be that close, but I think that Carson Palmer is good enough to be able to lead them down the field and get a few scores, but it's going to be for naught. It's going to be for naught. I think that New Orleans is on a mission this year to really stick their middle social finger up to the entire league and say, okay, you know what, we did a bad thing. You guys punished us harshly, but we can still come back and play.
Sure. I agree completely. I think there is a pride aspect going on with the Saints right now, especially after they started off ugly. I think
right.
is a kind word. So, and this game is pretty much, in my mind, the same as the previous game as far as where the teams are at. The Raiders, same old Raiders, as I keep saying, and they aren't going anywhere. The the Raiders, I think, offensively are showing improvement for running the right plays and being in the right place, coming out and running to where you're supposed to be on the field, making it easier for Carlson Palmer to throw passes. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because they're still going to have lots of penalties. They're going to make dumb mistakes. They're going to drop the ball on the ground a lot. That's the Raiders, style. So, like the Chiefs, I think they're at the bottom right now, and as a team, I think they're pretty demoralized. And again, the Saints are red hot right now, and they knocked off the Falcons, and they play with, even when they were down, they were playing with a lot of pride. And I agree with you completely that Drew Brees is the X factor in these games. He's such a great quarterback. He's a consistently great quarterback.
Yeah, he's for real.
He is definitely for real. And here's a chance for the Saints, who kind of discovered a running game last week, to run against one of the league's worst run defenses. I think the Saints can actually be a little more multidimensional. So I think the Saints win this 41. I think, like you, I'm going to give the Raiders some points, mostly because it seems like at the end of games, when things start getting a little bit away from them, they seem to wake up and start scoring points. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to make it 41-24, which is actually, 1 point off.
41-24.
So we're pretty much on the same page in music.
That's pretty funny.
That's scary. I'm waiting for something that bad.
Yeah, and we do not discuss our picks before we sit down here. I mean, this is completely independent research.
Yes.
All right, well, let's talk about that Denver-San Diego game. I think you're going to be surprised here.
Oh.
I actually am going to call this as a close game.
Okay.
I'm going to call this a 28-24 victory for Denver.
Okay.
Now, the reason is that right now the failure of the rush is making Denver a monodimensional team.
Absolutely.
And I think that there's just enough mojo with San Diego to take advantage of that. They've got enough D to be able to punish the Broncos for being monodimensional.
Okay.
Also, last week, Carolina being able to shut down the Denver offense for nearly half the game raises some questions. What's going on there? And until the Broncos show me that they can, really play well again, I'm hedging a little bit on their production. The other side of it is that it seems like Phillip Rivers is always good for a pick six. And I fully expect the Denver D for one of those 4 touchdowns I'm predicting to be a defensive touchdown on a pick six from Rivers. I'm actually willing to put that in my prediction.
Okay.
That Denver D is going to come up with a pick six on Rivers.
It's funny, when you gave me that score, I was going to comment that, so you're going for the responsible Phillip Rivers score. But that's interesting that you're saying that the Denver D will shut him down enough that Rivers will still throw in 6, and they'll shut him down for the rest.
I gave San Diego 24 points. I think it's going to be 2 touchdowns, and the rest is going to be kicks.
Okay.
And that's it.
Well, continuing the harmony of the picks, I got the same concerns. Denver's offense in the last couple of weeks has shown the inability to run the ball. It makes Manning have to pass it all the time, and as great as a quarterback as Manning is, that does cause problems. And it's last week it made it hard for us against a pretty mediocre team. But again, this game, like last week's pick and the week before that, completely depends on Phillip Rivers. I believe that both teams are competitive against each other. These teams don't like each other.
Right.
Boy,
God knows that San Diego Chargers have ruined the Broncos' day so many times I can't count.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, if Phillip Rivers was a consistent quarterback,
right,
the only way I could call this game would be, the home team's probably going to win this. But Phillip Rivers isn't a consistent quarterback, and he's the crazy X factor. So
right.
If he's consistent, I think it'll be competitive. But I don't think he's going to be. Like you, I'm thinking, he's going to throw at least 1 pick that'll probably go back for a touchdown, or put the Broncos in a place to get 6 or 7 points. And when that happens, that's a 14-point swing.
Right.
You lose your 7, and you give them 7. It's such an enormous. That's why turnovers are death to a team. I think Rivers will be inconsistent. I think he'll do the selfish thing that he always does. And I think it's going to be almost like a replay of last week's game for the Chargers. It'll be a back-and-forth game until the fourth quarter. Rivers will screw it up at some point, give up the 6
right.
points or the turnover that basically lets Denver, move it down themselves for the touchdown or the field goal. And that'll put the game out of the reach for the Chargers, who seem now these days just to fall apart as soon as Rivers starts to that first interception, the team doesn't seem interested in playing. And they don't seem interested in playing when they're on the field in general. But once Rivers starts being Rivers, the team just deflates.
Yeah.
And because they don't have any, I don't think they trust him. They don't believe in him. And they just, it's the same old for them. Imagine playing for a guy in a team sport. You're playing your best games, and especially on a team where a lot of the players are on the back ends of their careers, and they're seeing that window for the going in the deep into the playoffs getting smaller and smaller, and you do everything right. And you see Philip Rivers do an interception. You're like, crap, there goes another game.
Right.
The bottom line for this game is that for the Chargers to have any chance at a playoff run at this point, they have to beat the Broncos. They lose both games to the Broncos, they're done.
They are.
It's both. So,
and conversely, I mean, let's roll back the season a little bit. To me, that incredible, pounding that we got in the first half of the game against San Diego, followed by one of the greatest point turnarounds ever in NFL history,
crazy.
Right?
Absolutely crazy. Yeah,
exactly. So. That was kind of a turnaround in the Broncos season. We were kind of wobbling along, and then that game, and boom, we've got a winning streak that we're piling up, and we're looking like, one of the top 5, teams in the league.
Sure. Well, you know what? Actually, I never got to my pick.
Oh.
So, I will pick the Denver Broncos to win 35-24. What was your pick?
28-24.
So we're still pretty close,
right?
So
I mean, you're giving them another touchdown. I'm not willing to quite give them their normal 30 points this week.
Sure. So I think that does it for picks for this week. Again, only 3 games. The interesting thing is that we're either for next week's we're either going to be right or wrong together because all 3 of our picks were within just a few points of each other, which probably spells doom for all 3 of the picks. All right, so I think that'll wrap it up for Sportishness this week. Jonathan, enjoy good football.
This week on Snap Judgment, who will win? Raiders versus Saints, Chiefs versus Bengals, Broncos versus Chargers, and he's terrible for 500 Quatlos.
Saints, Bengals, Broncos, Tim Tebow. Back to you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
This week on Snap Judgment, who will win? Raiders versus Bengals, Chargers versus Ravens, Broncos versus Chiefs, and finally, for 50 Centauri ducats, he'll be the first coach fired.
Bengals, Ravens, Broncos, and Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo Crennel? Back to you, John.
Thank you.
The Denver and Kansas City game. Now, the easiest thing to say is that this is going to be a, Denver taking Kansas City out behind the woodshed, giving them a what for. But
we have thought that a few times this year, and it hasn't come to fruition.
Yes, and you know what? Manning said that himself said that that they it would be death for them to look past Kansas City's offense. And or defense, excuse me. Their defense has actually been relatively strong. And look how they took it to Pittsburgh recently. So I have absolutely no doubt the Broncos are going to win. I think that it's going to be interesting also to see. Apparently, there's a chance that Brady Quinn, our former backup quarterback, of course, could be their starting quarterback, and that could be interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, I've actually never seen Brady Quinn play, so nice to, after being a bench warmer for 2 years, it'll be nice to finally see the guy air out a ball.
It really sucks in sports to play left out.
Oh God, I know. The thing about it too is that for me, the really big story again is DJ Williams coming back to the lineup. I really think that he has been a missing ingredient for particularly for the pass defense. And, they're trying to figure out right now how exactly to use him. He prefers to play, weak side or strong side, typically weak side. He'll probably get weak side roles. But the thing about it is Woodyard has been playing really well on the weak side. And, of course, Von Miller's been playing strong side. So you're not going to, you're not going to mess with Miller. You don't want to, mess with the success that Woodyard's having too much. So it could be that, he's going to get slotted in on certain kinds of situations. I am absolutely blown away by what a remarkable defense we have. I mean, Miller, Dumervil, Woodyard, Williams, and Brookings and Trevathan have been doing pretty well too. And Trevathan has been really important. As a rookie, he's been an important mix in the linebacker core. And I think it's only going to get stronger. In fact, I'm kind of with Mark Klee of the Denver Post right now. That I think that in the end, it's going to be the defense led by the performance of Von Miller that could have more of an influence on Denver's chance at a Super Bowl than Mr. Manning.
Defenses win championships. It's an oldie but a goodie. It's generally true.
So anyway, I'm sorry. I went way out there, but bottom line is I see Denver racking up 38 points. I see Kansas City barely being able to muster 10. It could quite possibly be less than that.
Okay.
Because I think that the defense is going to smother them, which is why I went out on that whole diatribe about Williams' contribution to the defense.
Sure. I think for this game, in my mind, the game will be decided probably off the field for a couple things. One, the fans have given up completely on the team and the coaching staff. They're wearing black to games now. They're like in mourning. So the question then becomes, off the field, does the team have any pride in itself? Is it going to try to win this game? Is it going to try to play the royal spoiler, which is really realistically the only thing they have left to play for at this point? Will they play for Cornell at the end of the day is the bottom line. Mm-hmm. I don't think so. They haven't to date. They showed a spark of life 2 weeks ago.
Right.
But last week they just collapsed being back to the regular self. Mm-hmm. So, that's a big question. Also, you don't keep switching quarterbacks every half because you don't like the quarterback's performance. You make a decision and you stick with it. If the guy stinks, you take the new guy out, you put the old guy back in, and that's the end of the conversation. You don't go, back and forth between your two starting quarterbacks. Now they had a concussion thing that that changed from Castle to Quinn and back and forth.
Right.
But last week they changed the quarterbacks at halftime, and now they have not announced the starter. No offensive unit likes that. No quarterback, no athlete ever likes being jerked around like that. And that speaks more to the problems in the front office and the coaching staff of the Chiefs and control of their own team than anything. So I don't think they're showing up to play.
Yeah.
And I don't think the fans care enough about the team that the players are going to play to them. That happens sometimes in sports. Mm-hmm. Listen, we've stunk it up, but hey, these guys are paying good money. We need to go out there and kick some butt. When the fans turn against you, the whole thing is sour. Nobody's happy. Like you, I don't think the Chiefs have a chance. The only question I have two questions about the Broncos. Can they run the ball? That's going to be a challenge. Another thing is, can they stop fumbling the ball? Good Lord. It's just like every time I see a run back, I'm like, that's going to be fumble because people don't run the ball. Every time I see a run break for a bit and the guy's dancing, it's going to be a fumble. They've got to get that under control. Last week they only lost one of those, but it
could have gone another way.
It could have gone another way on them. The reality for the Chiefs, if they lose this game, they're mathematically eliminated for the playoffs. You've got no chance. So again, are they playing for a playoff spot? I sincerely doubt it. But the Broncos have the opportunity here to knock them out of the park. I'm saying Denver will go actually above their normal 30 range and go to 41.
Okay.
And the Chiefs will manage to get 13 points. So they'll get a touchdown somewhere, maybe a Manning pick or fumble picked up off the ground, puts the offense in a great position, something like that. We seem to have that happen at least once a game. Mm-hmm. And the rest will just be field goals from stall tries.
Well, you were talking about the running game, and of course, the loss of Marino, of McGahee brings Marino possibly back into the mix, which could be a Greek tragedy. Yes, I know. From what I understand, one of the chief criteria for who is going to get the most running reps is actually who can provide the best pass protection.
Yes, and Ball's doing that right now.
Yeah, so something to be said for that.
Sure.
The other thing, though, and I actually had to read this elsewhere, and then I went back and kind of confirmed it for myself. But apparently, over the course of this season, Denver has been working more and more on what turn out to be running downs. Have been working more and more with a 3 wide receiver set to run from. Early on in the season, they were doing more 2 running back, 2 tight end sets. So one of the questions that's going to be interesting and quite possibly answered is, since they're going to have to kind of go with a mix and match running core here, are they going to get away from the 3 wide receiver packages and go to a more conservative tight end 2 running back set, advertise it? But that also answers something else too, which is I believe now, having read this and confirmed it, I think that there's something about how they're doing their 3 wide receiver sets that they run out of that is a tell to the rest of the league. Somebody's gotten a clue about what the Broncos are doing out of these 3 wide receiver running sets. So it could actually work to the Broncos' advantage to be working with some other setups because they have less confidence to run out of that package.
Sure.
And they might start seeing some success again.
They only run a certain number of plays or a certain number of successful plays out of that 1-1-3. And I think the league is starting to pick up on that, reasonably consistently. So John Fox is a great coach. I'm sure he sees that kind of stuff. So,
right.
I think that'll it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out against the Chiefs. To me, it's a practice game. You can never look past that.
Right.
But if you are going to start trying some new things and you want to see how these run out, this is probably the game to do it in.
Absolutely. Welcome to the Thanksgiving holiday mega special with no singing and dancing, no special guests like Robin Williams or.
Sure. We will not be having Peyton Manning on this show.
Right.
Other people not to appear in this show will be any member of the Broncos organization.
Right. Because we don't have our press passes yet.
Press pass, please, people.
Press pass.
All right, do you want to start with the Chiefs and Bengals?
Yes, let's start with the Chiefs and Bengals.
All right. So last week we
walk like an Egyptian. The Bengals, not the Bengals.
Oh, right. Although, well, no. All right. So last week, Chiefs versus the Bengals. This game was pretty much straight up. We both called it pretty close to each other. I called it 13-27. You called it 16-28. The final score was 6-28, which is, for both of us, I would consider that a yes and a yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, we both assumed that they would get a touchdown. They only managed a pair of field goals.
Which is what I called, ironically, the week before. I just didn't think they had the offensive juice. But
one thing that did surprise me was Cincinnati was able to hold Kansas City to only 113 yards rushing, and their leading rusher, Kansas City.
Jamal Charles.
Jamal Charles. Thank you. He only had 75, 80 yards.
80-ish, 80-ish rushing, not 100.
So that surprised me. That's where I thought the touchdown was going to come from. It didn't come, and, well, the result was what it is.
Sure. We talked about this last week. That's all they can do right now is run the ball. Of course, the other teams are going to load up on that. They did. They stopped Jamal Charles for 87. Still a good day for him, but, again, it's the same old Kansas City. They can't convert third downs. They're no good in the red zone. They keep switching between quarterbacks. And now we're down to switching the quarterbacks every half. So it's not a recipe for success there. They're just a bad team. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on this unless you want to talk how good the Bengals did.
Not really. I mean, we are focused in the show on the Western Conference. So
yeah. So it's the same old cheese. We keep talking about them. They're in the cellar. They're not going anywhere. At this point, I think it's pretty clear that the fans want the organization to start cleaning house, even though we're talking some first-year coaches and assistants. We'll see how much pressure the fans can bring to bear on the team, but they suck. Anyway.
The thing about it, too, is that I think the organization went to some lengths to get Matt Castle.
Yes.
And, they wanted him as a quarterback of the future. And I don't know. I think I would probably be inclined to actually get rid of the coach before Matt Castle because, quarterbacks don't exactly grow on trees.
No.
But there are certainly an awful lot of pieces that need to be put in place.
Okay. No. I think that's a fair enough wrap-up.
Yeah.
Raiders versus the Saints. Actually, I should say the Raiders at the Saints to use the correct terminology. On this one, you called it 24-42. I called it 24-41. Both of us called the Saints winning this one by a pretty big margin. The final score was 17-38. So again, we were pretty close. In my mind, this is like the Bengals-Chiefs game. This is definitely a game of two teams on different trajectories.
Exactly.
The Raiders aren't doing very well. They've got a lot of injuries, especially in the running back end of the business. The Saints have kind of found themselves again and are playing incredibly tough football. And it was 7-21 at the half. This game was just never close. The Raiders' defense is horrible. They can't stop anything, running or passing.
Well, I will say that the most interesting part of this to me, it wasn't a surprise that Oakland gave up, a couple of really important interceptions, one of which, went for a score. But to me, the big story was on New Orleans' side. The fact that they actually gave up 284 yards of passing and 120 yards of rushing.
Yeah, I found the rushing stat very surprising, actually, that the Raiders could stick with it that long if they could rack up that many yards.
Yeah. So. I think it hangs an asterisk on how far we might expect New Orleans to go. I mean, they've got a tough road to hoe anyway because, they're at 5-5 this late in the season, going to be kind of a challenge to find a playoff berth.
Sure.
If they do, though, that's where the asterisk comes in. What could they do in the postseason? And I think the fact that their defense, well, they've got to outscore what their defense is giving up, and their defense is giving up too much. I mean, against a really good team, they would probably get obliterated.
Probably. I mean, I guess, there's a couple things I did write down as highlights. Carson Palmer 3 for 312, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, not very good. Of course, when you're behind, quarterbacks tend to rack up hundreds of yards,
right.
Which is the nature of the game. But something that was interesting is, they were down to a fullback as their only real viable tailback.
Yeah.
19 rushes, 103 yards, and 4 receptions for 90. I mean, it's a 200-yard day for a fullback. That's pretty rare in the NFL these days. So, hey,
no doubt.
That's something to build on. And something else I think good about Oakland this game is they only had 4 penalties.
Yes. Yeah,
that's
exactly.
a change of pace. They're usually in double digits.
Oh, yes. And in fact, against New Orleans, 11 penalties.
Yeah.
I mean, normally a team that gives up that many penalties is not going to win.
Although a couple of the Saints penalties were them going, "We just kicked your butt" on great plays. It was a couple taunting and unsportsmanlike kind of things. But
yes,
still,
it was.
It definitely played a lot more indisciplined than the Raiders. And that's something I think to build on for next week. They're not in the cellar, but I also another team I don't really think is going anywhere. I don't think we have to spend a ton of time on them.
Absolutely.
All right.
So getting to our favorite topic here, which is, of course, Denver. What a fascinating game that was, Denver versus San Diego.
Yeah.
Let's see. I called it at 28-24, and what did you call it?
I called it 35-24.
35-24.
And we didn't collaborate on any of these picks. We just came up with these independently. But
absolutely. So yeah, we were pretty dang close on that. DJ Williams. I'd forgotten all about DJ Williams coming in.
Right.
And so I was really fascinated to see what impact DJ Williams was going to have on the game. And I think what I saw was that he's more known as a linebacker that can really kind of stuff a run more so than be a coverage linebacker. And I think we saw some of that. I think they actually did a little bit better on their rush defense.
They did very good on their rush defense.
Although, one thing that's kind of surprised me is as much criticism as I've had of the Broncos' rush defense, they're now the fifth rush defense in the league, at least as far as yards allowed.
Okay.
So, but the thing about it is having DJ Williams back is a great thing. He's a fabulous addition.
There's a lot of great things that happened in this game. The Denver defense did great. Now, this is against the Chargers offensive line that they basically picked up out of the stands right before the game. I mean, they had guys that were second, third string, shifted positions around. It was going to be a bad day for the Chargers, pretty much whoever they were going to play.
No, we watched this game independently of one another, so I have a question for you on that. Did you see that the announcers made a deal of where Rivers was trying to call an adjustment to the line?
They were trying to slide the protection out to the edges.
Exactly, and it seemed like the line just didn't hear him or blew him off or something, but then he got dumped and he came up and he was like, Damn it, I told you to move.
I think there's plenty of blame to go around at that point. I think the center wasn't listening to the quarterback. It was kind of late, and everybody was getting set, so people stopped looking behind them, and it's hard to hear, know. So I think this was a kind of a case of a miscommunication.
Especially Mile High Stadium. Boy, that is a hard stadium to hear in.
So, yeah, I think Rivers clearly saw the blitz coming, and the lineman didn't pick up on his signal, and that's where the fault is. Absolutely, I don't know. But in general, that was kind of the offensive line all day. There was a lot of miscommunications. We had a field day on Rivers. We sacked him a lot. We picked him a lot. I said last week, as I always say about Phillip Rivers, do we get the good Phillip Rivers or the bad Phillip Rivers? Well, even though he got picked a lot and was on his back a lot, I think we basically got the good Phillip Rivers, except for that one early interception. It's not. I consider bad Phillip Rivers quarterbacking selfish plays, where he's just hot dogging the ball around the field, hoping for a miracle.
Yeah. Except
for that one interception, and that, I can go into detail about why that play happened. That was actually brilliant on the Broncos' part. He played as good as ball as could be expected, given the offensive line he had. I think at the end of the day, the Broncos defense did great. We had a special teams blocked punt. That's all great.
Right.
But what I saw on the offense, of course, we lost our tailback for 6 to 8 weeks.
Right.
That's a huge problem for us. We did manage to run it reasonably successful the rest of the day, which was good. But I saw a lot of overthrown balls that game. It was I would say 6 to 8 overthrown balls that made this game a lot closer than it should have been. There was many plays where the ball just landed 3 yards outside the receiver's grasp, and then that I would say we probably gave 21 points on overthrown balls.
I can't really dig this out of the stats, but I got the impression in the game, speaking of that, with overthrown balls, that I got this sense that we're having a problem sustaining drives right now.
Absolutely.
And where, a lot of our points were on quick strikes. Like there was one where I think it was the first series. I think it may have been the first series of the second quarter. It was, we got the ball, and I think that, 2 plays later threw it in for a touchdown. Sure. So, that seemed to be the way we scored. It was like San Diego just kind of got it out of the way of our scoring chances, rather than us grinding it down the field. That worries me right now. The other side of it, though, is that we I think 3-and-outed 2 teams, across 2 games. We caused like 26, 27.
26 in a row.
Yeah, 26.
And they still finished up 3-13. So, you can just basically say 3-26 on third down conversions for over a 2-game span.
Yeah, that, early on in the season, we had concerns about the Denver defense not being able to get the opposing teams off the field. Well, they're doing it now. Yes. 3-and-outs are the very definition of the defense doing its job.
Yeah, I agree completely. This was... Again, we have a case where the entire Denver unit didn't necessarily play very well, as in all 3 phases. But when the offense is coming up short, the defense has definitely picked up the game, and vice versa. The Denver did great; they won that game. I thought they let San Diego hang around when they shouldn't have at the end of the game. But again, that's sustaining drives, and that has been a constant problem. So a couple of things I really liked about this game from the metagame perspective was that John Fox did a really good job of being patient. There were a couple 4th down and short plays inside the red zone where he just said, listen, I'm going to take my 3 points. He did that 3 times, actually. And that added up to be the exact number of points we needed to beat beat them. And the fans were going a little crazy about that and thinking those were bad calls. And as somebody who likes football, it's like, yeah, go for it, because it's an exciting play.
Right.
But the reality was he took 3 field goals. They made them all, and that turned out to be the difference in the game. So again, not listening to the fans, knowing the situation on the field, and doing a great job there. Otherwise, good job, Denver. And which actually I think brings us right to the next thing, which is, where does that win put us?
Where does that put us?
Well, the playoff hunt at this point, I think in the AFC West is realistically over. We're starting to get down to these oddball things where, if it's a Tuesday and it's raining and somebody's mother brought cookies, another team can get in. But from a winning the division championship, guaranteeing a spot in the playoffs, at this point the Broncos have a 3-game numeric lead over the Chargers. But the reality is, because they beat them twice, if the Chargers just tie them at the end of the season, they still don't go based on the division win.
Right.
The Chargers got to win 4 out of 6, and the Broncos have to basically lose the basically same number. I think I got it basically down here as so the AFC West playoff hunt at this point boils down to the following. So for the Broncos, it's pretty straightforward. Win any 3 of the next 6. Doesn't matter what the teams are, and you're in. And considering we got 2 games against KC, that seems to make it pretty straightforward. That's all we've got to do. And in fact, the Broncos can knock the Chiefs out of the playoffs next week. Chiefs lose any games at this point, they're out.
Right.
The Chargers, they have to win 4 of their last 6, and the Broncos must lose at least 4 of their last 6, and the Raiders have to lose 2. So it's not impossible, but it depends on the Broncos losing 2/3 of their final games. The Raiders, it's pretty crazy. This is the best path to the division championship. They've got to win everything. The Broncos got to lose everything. Chargers got to lose everything, and they're in. No problem. Or they have to win at least 5 of the last 6 games, beat the Broncos. The Broncos must lose 5 of 6. They must beat the Chargers. The Chargers must lose 5 of 6, and that puts the whole division, except for the Chiefs, in
a partridge in a pear tree.
It puts the top 3 teams in division 8-8, and then we're down to tiebreakers, and it gets a little funny after that. That's not happening. The Chiefs, basically, it's really simple for them. They have to win everything. The Broncos have to lose everything, and the Chargers and Raiders got to lose the bulk of their games.
Right.
It's their season, I think, is pretty much realistically over at this point. So the Broncos do have, the division, I think, pretty well locked up. But then it's down to what are they going to do as far as moving up to a bye? Right now, they're the 4th place team. They're tied with the New England Patriots at 7-3, but the Patriots have beaten us, so they win the tiebreaker. So we have to end up the season to get past the New England Patriots into the 3 slot. We have to have a 1 game win better record than the Patriots. It's a challenge. So, but get legitimately into the bye, the top 2 teams are Houston at 9-1 and Baltimore at 8-2. So Baltimore is a team that we're actually going to play. We have to win one more than Baltimore and beat Baltimore just to tie them.
Right.
But then the tiebreaker goes to us. So that Baltimore game actually is getting to be more and more important by the week. Catching the Texans, that's going to be that's a tough road to hoe. They're at this point they're 2 games in front of us with 6 to play. If we win out and they lose a couple on the way, it's definitely possible. But the 2 seed is possible, but a real challenge at this point.
The bottom line is, again, John and I worked on these analyses independent of one another, and we've obviously seen the same kinds of things. But to me, what I like best about this season, unlike the last decade, is that we own our destiny.
Yes.
The Broncos can unless they have a ridiculous fall off in production. I mean, I think worst case scenario, rationally for me, is a 4-2 record in these remaining 6 games. And the fact of the matter is that there's every reason to expect that they could actually make it 6-6, that they could finish off, winning every game. And that not only means, of course, in the next couple of weeks, the Broncos are going to really close out all the mathematics, or can close out all the mathematics for the division. So really, to me, all the focus is on whether they're going to get a first-round bye or not, and they're completely in charge of that too.
Absolutely. And Baltimore to me is a must-win game for a couple reasons. One, it helps them get to that 2 spot. But another reason is chances are they're going to face Baltimore or a team as tough as Baltimore almost right away. Mm-hmm. And if you go to play Baltimore and you get blown out, Well, that doesn't say a lot about the Broncos. It says that we had a really easy second half of the schedule, and yes, we can beat up on the weak sisters in the league, but we can't play with the big boys, and we're not going to go deep.
Exactly.
So the Baltimore game is both strategically important for the playoff hunt, but also tactically important to kind of let us know where we're at as a football team.
You know, one of the strangest things about Baltimore is, you know, they're number 2 in the AFC,
Right.
but they're 16th in the pass, 25th in the rush, 27th in pass defense, and 23rd in pass defense and 27th in rush defense.
Right.
So basically, we're talking about statistically a team that's in the bottom half of the league, in 4 major areas of the game. So how is it that they're piling up the record that they are? And to me, it speaks of a vulnerability, a place where we should be able to match our better offense against issues with their defense, and our defense ranked at number 5 and number 12 respectively, I think. Can do something pretty sweet against Baltimore and Joe Flacco.
Yeah, I think there's a real opportunity there. I quite frankly wish we were playing them this weekend.
I do too.
Because they don't have, who is it? Reed is out because of that illegal hit. And they're not playing consistently good ball right now. They're kind of in a bit of disarray. So, who knows how things are going to be in a couple weeks.
Right.
All right.
On to picks?
On the picks. So, right. Do you want to run with these first?
Sure, I'll take the first go.
Right.
So, on the Oakland and Cincinnati game, I don't think there's any mystery about who's going to come on top of this game. Cincinnati has been playing tough. I see them racking up 27 points. I see Oakland being able to put together 13 points. But I think that Cincinnati has demonstrated in the last several weeks a pretty balanced defense. Statistically, they're a pretty balanced defense. And Oakland is a one-dimensional team. I mean, they are, I believe, 31st in rush. So, if it weren't for Palmer's arm, they wouldn't really, have a game. They'd be, hugging the toilet with Kansas City right now.
Sure.
So I think they're going to eat their lunch.
Okay, 27-13. That's a pretty good call. To me, it's the same old Raiders. Generally bad play. They did better in penalties last week, but just disorganized, throwing empty spots on the field. Their tailback situation is bad. They've got a lot of injuries. They're starting a fullback right now. And the Bengals have played hard, and the Bengals are in a position right now to maybe crawl back in this if they keep playing well. And quite frankly, they've played the entire AFC West hard.
They have.
And so I'm going to call this one at 34-20, which is pretty close to
34-20, all right.
Just because the Raiders tend to rack up garbage time points pretty well for some reason. I'm not sure if the other teams are just taking it easy, but they just seem to be able to rack up an extra touchdown or two at the end of the game.
I know. I actually kind of waffled a little bit on how many points to give to Oakland. I mean, nothing close to a winning score. It's just how much the Cincinnati defense might dominate.
Yeah, it's probably going to be something like 31-13 or,
Right.
something in that area pretty close to the end of the game, and they might knock in a point or two or a score or two. Chargers versus the Ravens. And I think this game actually might be a little bit closer than a lot of people think. I think a lot of people saying the Chargers are a complete disarray, the Ravens are going to stomp them. But the reality in my mind right now is both the Chargers and the Ravens have very inconsistent quarterbacks who can be selfish at times. They're not playing well offensively in general. So because of the selfishness issue, Flacco and Rivers, you never can tell what they're going to do.
Right.
It's hard to tell offensively which one is better any given week. It's really hard. Even with statistics, I can't figure that out. Defensively, I think the Ravens are a much better team. But the Chargers showed last week against the Broncos that they can step it up when they have to. Mm-hmm. So while the Ravens tend to play reasonably consistent defense, the Chargers, statistically, they're at the bottom of the pile when it comes to defense. Last week showed up and all of a sudden made it a game. They scored 9 points on us last week. But the Chargers don't have a healthy offensive line. They've got too many substitutions. And have second string, third string players playing out of position, completely, guards playing center, that kind of thing.
Right.
I think ultimately that's what gives this game the edge. I think Baltimore does win by a pretty hefty score, but I think this game will be reasonably tight till the end. I'm saying Baltimore 31 and the Chargers 17.
I see Baltimore giving Phillip Rivers fits.
I don't disagree.
I think that they're going to be in the backfield in the pocket with him the whole game, and I think they're going to tend to be very, very aggressive against him. I mean, basically, we've shown twice this year, the Broncos have shown twice this year, that a hyper-aggressive defense can actually work well.
It just destroyed Rivers. And again,
Right.
that wasn't his fault, but
Right. So the thing about it is that I really see Baltimore having Phillip Rivers on his heels. However, I also see San Diego piling up 20 points.
no. Okay, so what do you got there?
And Baltimore, I see doing 24 points.
Wow.
See, now, I probably spent a good 20 minutes to half an hour researching Baltimore a little bit more to try to get a better sense of how many points to give these guys. Because, on one hand, they can win a 10-9 game.
Yes. 13-10, that
Or
kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly.
Sure.
But on the other hand, they piled up 55 points against Oakland.
Yes.
So I don't know which team is going to show up.
Right, exactly.
So basically, I said that this is going to be a grindy fest, and with both primarily a defensive struggle with just little chinks in the armor, defensive armor, allowing the other teams to pile up 20 and 24 points.
Okay, so basically you went with the the offenses will be erratic enough that the defenses will shut them down. And I was kind of in the same thing, but figured the Chargers tend to collapse when things start going against them. So I gave them a couple extra touchdowns.
As a matter of fact, somewhere around I heard that the Chargers have allowed the most points in the league right now in the fourth quarter or something like that.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, it's
A
pretty
Denver
bad.
game, of course, skews that statistic pretty horribly.
Yes, it does. All right, and then we've got the Denver and Kansas City game. Now, the easiest thing to say is that this is going to be a Denver taking Kansas City out behind the woodshed, giving them a what for. But
we have thought that a few times this year, and it hasn't come to fruition.
Yes, and you know what? Manning said that himself said that it would be death for them to look past Kansas City's offense and defense. Excuse me. Their defense has actually been relatively strong, and look how they took it to Pittsburgh recently. So I have absolutely no doubt the Broncos are going to win. I think that it's going to be interesting also to see. Apparently, there's a chance that Brady Quinn, our former backup quarterback, of course, could be their starting quarterback, and that could be interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, I've actually never seen Brady Quinn play, so nice to after being a bench warmer for 2 years, it'll be nice to finally see the guy air out a ball.
It really sucks in sports to play left out.
Oh God, I know. The thing about it too is that for me, the really big story again is DJ Williams coming back to the lineup. I really think that he has been a missing ingredient for particularly for the pass defense. And, they're trying to figure out right now how exactly to use him. He prefers to play, weak side or strong side, typically weak side. He'll probably get weak side roles. But the thing about it is Woodyard has been playing really well on the weak side. And, of course, Von Miller's been playing strong side. So you're not going to, you're not going to mess with Miller. You don't want to, mess with the success that Woodyard's having too much. So it could be that, he's going to get slotted in on certain kinds of situations. I am absolutely blown away by what a remarkable defense we have. I mean, Miller, Dumervil, Woodyard, Williams, and Brookings and Trevathan have been doing pretty well too. And Trevathan has been a really important. As a rookie, he's been an important mix in the linebacker core. And I think it's only going to get stronger. In fact, I'm kind of with Mark Klee of the Denver Post right now. That I think that in the end, it's going to be the defense led by the performance of Von Miller that could have more of an influence on Denver's chance at a Super Bowl than Mr. Manning.
Defenses win championships. It's an oldie but a goodie. It's generally true.
So anyway, I'm sorry. I went way out there, but bottom line is I see Denver racking up 38 points. I see Kansas City barely being able to muster 10. it could quite possibly be less than that.
Okay.
Because I think that the defense is going to smother them, which is why I went out on that whole diatribe about Williams' contribution to the defense.
Sure. I think for this game, in my mind, the game will be decided probably off the field for a couple things. One, the fans have given up completely on the team and the coaching staff. They're wearing black to games now. They're like in mourning. So the question then becomes, off the field, does the team have any pride in itself? Is it going to try to win this game? Is it going to try to play the royal spoiler, which is really realistically the only thing they have left to play for at this point? Will they play for Crennel at the end of the day is the bottom line. Mm-hmm. I don't think so. They haven't to date. They showed a spark of life 2 weeks ago.
Right.
But last week they just collapsed, being back to the regular self. Mm-hmm. So that's a big question. Also, you don't keep switching quarterbacks every half because you don't like the quarterback's performance. You make a decision and you stick with it. If the guy stinks, you take the new guy out, you put the old guy back in, and that's the end of the conversation. You don't go back and forth between your two starting quarterbacks. Now they had a concussion thing that changed from Castle to Quinn and back and forth.
Right.
But last week they changed the quarterbacks at halftime, and now they have not announced the starter. No offensive unit likes that. No quarterback, no athlete ever likes being jerked around like that. And that speaks more to the problems in the front office and the coaching staff of the Chiefs and control of their own team than anything. So I don't think they're showing up to play.
Yeah.
And I don't think the fans care enough about the team that the players are going to play to them. That happens sometimes in sports.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, we've stunk it up, but hey, these guys are paying good money. We need to go out there and kick some butt. When the fans turn against you, the whole thing is sour. Nobody's happy. Like you, I don't think the Chiefs have a chance. The only question I really have I have two questions about the Broncos. Can they run the ball? That's going to be a challenge. Another thing is, can they stop fumbling the ball? Good Lord. It's just like every time I see a run back, I'm like, that's going to be fumble because people don't want to go. Every time I see a run break for a bit and the guy's dancing, it's going to be a fumble. They've got to get that under control. Last week they only lost one of those, but it
could have gone another way.
It could have gone another way on them. The reality for the Chiefs, if they lose this game, they're mathematically eliminated for the playoffs. You've got no chance. So again, are they playing for a playoff spot? I sincerely doubt it. But the Broncos have the opportunity here to knock them out of the park. I'm saying Denver will go actually above their normal 30 range and go to 41.
Okay.
And the Chiefs will manage to get 13 points. They'll get a touchdown somewhere, maybe a Manning pick or fumble picked up off the ground, puts the offense in a great position, something like that. We seem to have that happen at least once a game. Mm-hmm. And the rest will just be field goals from stall drives.
Well, you were talking about the running game, and of course, the loss of Marino, McGahee brings Marino possibly back into the mix, which could be a Greek tragedy. Yes, I know. From what I understand, one of the chief criteria for who is going to get the most running reps is actually who can provide the best pass protection.
Yes, and Ball's doing that right now.
Yeah. So something to be said for that.
Sure.
The other thing, though, and I actually had to read this elsewhere, and then I went back and kind of confirmed it for myself. But apparently over the course of this season, Denver has been working more and more on what turn out to be running downs, have been working more and more with a 3 wide receiver set to run from. Early on in the season, they were doing more 2 running back, 2 tight end sets. So one of the questions that's going to be interesting and quite possibly answered is, since they're going to have to kind of go with a mix and match running core here, are they going to get away from the 3 wide receiver packages and go to a more conservative tight end 2 running back set, advertise it? But that also answers something else too, which is I believe now, having read this and confirmed it, I think that there's something about how they're doing their 3 wide receiver sets that they run out of that is a tell to the rest of the league. Somebody's gotten a clue about what the Broncos are doing out of these 3 wide receiver running sets. So it could actually work to the Broncos' advantage to be working with some other setups because they have less confidence to run out of that package.
Sure.
And they might start seeing some success again.
They only run a certain number of plays or a certain number of successful plays out of that 1-1-3. And I think the league is starting to pick up on that. reasonably consistently. So yeah, John Fox is a great coach. I'm sure he sees that kind of stuff. So
Right.
I think that'll it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out against the Chiefs. To me, it's a practice game. You can never look past that.
Right.
But if you are going to start trying some new things and you want to see how these run out, this is probably the game to do it in.
Absolutely.
As opposed to trying new things against the Ravens and losing downs, losing series, losing points, losing games. So, I think this one should be comfortable enough. So we've got, again, like last week, we only have 3 games on the board because we have, as tends to happen in the NFL, the modern NFL, division teams play a lot at the end of the season.
Right.
And again, we're also all pretty close on picks. I mean, it's I don't really see any place we're apart terribly much.
We're lined up on the wins and losses, and I think we're probably within 4 or 5 points of each other on this point prediction. So we'll see how this goes.
All right, perfect. All right, well, unless you got anything else, I think that could be it for this week.
I think that is it for this week.
All right, so we've got the picks on the board. It should be an exciting week. The Broncos can eliminate the Chiefs, and the Raiders and the Chargers are just hanging on the edge of the cliff. They make one mistake, and their chances go from really improbable to nearly impossible.
And next week, we're going to hang our butts off a limb, making some predictions about the postseason.
Ooh, postseason time. That's right.
Yes.
We're getting to that time of the year. All right, so for Sportsness, Jonathan, John, enjoy good football.
See you next week.
See you next week.
Welcome back again, our huge audience of, I don't know, huge
We're
proportions.
building. Yeah, we're building.
We're building. It's
the sooner we get the press pass, I believe, the larger our audience will be. Plus swag.
Right.
I decided we need more swag.
Yes,
we
need a swag giveaway, actually. Swag giveaway.
All right, so welcome to Sportsness. This is the end of Week 12. We're going to look ahead at Week 13. Jonathan, John, and last week we had some interesting games. So I think let's go ahead and when we start with last week's games.
Right. Well, let's go ahead and get Oakland and Cincinnati out of the way.
Sure. I mean, let's get them out of the way.
Yeah, let's just get them out of the way.
So the Raiders versus the Bengals. This game was actually pretty close to what we thought it was going to be from a score perspective. You called this one at 13-27 with the Bengals winning, and I said 20-34 with also the Bengals winning, and the score ended up being 10-34. So we were, reasonably close as things go. I think I'd say that's a yes, and a yes for you as well.
Yeah, I think we did okay with that one. The wheels have completely come off the Oakland bus.
Well, I mean, they have no running backs.
Yes.
And again, the one bright spot of this game was Reese. 15 rushes, 74 yards, 4 catches for 29, although he did drop 4. Well, I don't say drop it. There was 8 attempts, 4 completions to him. But everybody's figured out that the Raiders can really only pass the ball at this point. When you become one-dimensional in the NFL, you're doomed.
Right.
And Carlson Palmer, earlier in the season, was having a lot of success passing the ball because they had at least the threat of a run, but they're out of halfbacks, or they're tailbacks to converted fullback at this point. I don't want to spend all the time in this game unless you want to. I mean, this is another blowout by that half. It was 0-24. The game was over at halftime again. Another craptastic Oakland game. They still can't stop the run against anybody. It doesn't matter what the team is.
There was one bright spot. They only had 3 penalties.
You know what? Actually, I wrote it. That's funny. With my thing, I have the result, the score, and I try to say something good and bad about the AFC West team. I mean, here's what I got for the good thing. I already talked about Reese.
Right.
Unfortunately, now he's hurt.
Yes.
So, and he's probable, or for the next week, but who knows? So, my second thing was and then I said only 3 penalties for like 25 yards, but one of those penalties was where 2 players got ejected from their team in one play. They're 3-12 with 3rd down. They had 0-2 and 4th down. They never even made it to the red zone. Their one touchdown came from outside of it. They can't stop the run, and now they can't stop the pass. So the Raiders looked a little good early on this season, but you're right. I think the wheels have completely come off the Raiders. Are going nowhere.
Yeah, I think actually they're in worse shape right now mentally than, say, Kansas City or San Diego.
Yeah, at least KC played with some pride. And
they did.
Yeah, they did.
As a matter of fact, let's just abandon that. No, let's not go to Kansas City.
No, yeah, let's
talk about Baltimore and San Diego. John called it at 31 for Baltimore, 17 for San Diego. I called it at 24 for Baltimore and 20 for San Diego. And what we ended up with was 16 to 13.
I felt you were pretty ballpark on that one, so I actually wrote down, I gave you a yes on that one. I gave myself a meh. I was pretty far away on the point spread. We got him right, but I felt my point spread was a little far away to call that a good pick.
Even though I called it close, I still can't really... I don't feel like I really called it, because to me it was a flip and a coin which Flacco was going to show up.
Sure, and Phillip Rivers. I mean, it is. So given all those factors, given lots of X factors, a lot of different inputs, you got pretty tight. So
sun shines on a dog's butt every once in a while.
Exactly. So a meh and a yeah on that one, if you will. So here's a game where the Chargers play with a lot of pride. Trying to desperately stay alive for that wild card picture. They actually were winning at the halftime. And the only thing I can really say about this game is 4th and 29. You just can never let those convert. There's never an excuse for that. A couple of sports writers out there have talked about that. When they put together career highlight reel for North Turner, if they actually ever do, that 4th and 29 is going to be up there. The bright spot, one bright spot for San Diego was that Rivers didn't throw an interception. I thought for sure. In fact, one of the reasons why I don't think that I picked this game terribly well is because I guaranteed that there was going to be a pick six off of Rivers. Didn't happen. I have to say though, I mean, there's some real questions raised by Baltimore's performance against San Diego. I think they should have really dominated, and they didn't. And I don't. My big note here is that there are a lot of folks out there in the world that think that Flacco should get some credit for being a patient quarterback because he's known for kind of the long pass, right? Right.
The thing about it is that I can't really. Is it patience? Is it stupidity, or is it a lack of talent? I mean, if that's the only thing he can do, and that's part, and whatever success that San Diego was having in defending against Flacco's long passes, I mean, is that patience? Does that really count as patience? I don't really think so.
So I think one of the things that happens when you have an erratic quarterback, somebody who plays pretty streaky, is you get this situation where if the coaches can dial him back, you get an overly cautious quarterback sometimes.
Right.
I agree that this was another good Rivers game. This is the second or third game in a row where Rivers has actually played pretty well. I mean, given what he's got, an offensive line that anybody can run through. I think he got sacked like 4 or 5 times, 6 times. This is another weird game. It's hard to tell what the Ravens are up to week. So I really thought that they would have stomped the Chargers out. I think a couple of things that come out of this game is Turner's definitely toast at this point. There's just, I don't know how. I mean, I think he survives the season, but I don't think he comes back next year. I don't think this is a hard game for them to win, but that and if they had just lost it without the 4th and 29, if it just been like it'd gone down and there'd been a 3rd and short, and they converted. In other words, a play nobody really remembered after the game, then I don't think this would be coming up. But I think this is one of these things. It's just another arrow in his back.
Mm-hmm. And I agree, but the other side of it too is that you can't just throw North Turner under the bus. I mean, I really think that the ownership of that team needs to be thinking about something beyond Phillip Rivers. He is not the quarterback of their future.
Well, they've definitely got to move to the rebuilding phase. They're an older team, so they've definitely they've got to start thinking in this year's draft, next year's draft, and in the next couple of years about picking up his replacement, if nothing else, regardless of what you think about him. He's getting older.
So it's a little bit of a side note here on this game, but I think that if San Diego wants to do anything, they're going to have to make some major changes. As a matter of fact, the other 3 teams in our division, they're all in that same mode. The entire division except for us except the Broncos are in rebuilding mode right now.
Sure, absolutely. Denver Broncos at the Kansas City Chiefs. So we called this one pretty far apart. I called this one at you called this one at 38-10.
Yeah.
And with the Broncos winning, I called this one at 41-13.
Right.
The final was 17-9. I mean, that's 26 combined points.
We couldn't have been more wrong while still getting the right outcome.
Yeah, if we're picking the winners, we pick the winner. So this is definitely a meh and a meh.
Yeah.
We're not proud of it, but we definitely got at least the winner's right. So
Yeah.
and so far, I think in all the picks we've done, I've only gotten one wrong so far, and you've been completely on target as far as the winner and loser. So that's not too bad.
Yeah, not bad.
This game actually didn't go at all like we thought about.
Absolutely
I
not.
prophesied this last week that the Chiefs would just completely fall apart off the field before they even got on the field. That clearly did not happen.
No,
They
it
showed up
didn't.
to play.
They played with pride.
And I know we thought the Broncos would show up and just stomp them into the ground.
Right.
And and everything that I don't want to say everything we thought. We knew Jamal Charles was going to run for some good yardage.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, even though we picked the win, I don't really consider this to be an accurate read by us at all. But then again, that's the X factor. This is the any given Sunday factor.
Sure.
Bottom line is, you know what? I say hats off, Kansas City, hats off to a really good game. I want to give you guys props for playing your bleeping hearts out. Okay?
They played a hell of a game.
They really did. They really did. I mean, you know what? The Kansas City secondary was like glue, like flypaper on Demaryius Thomas and Eric Decker.
Sure.
I mean, and in terms of shutting down those wide receivers, one of my great disappointments in that game was the way that Denver did not adjust quickly enough in terms of involving more tight end plays, because the wide receivers weren't working. I don't understand why the Denver was so slow to evolve their offense to other pass methods. So, what do you think about that?
I thought that Kansas City showed up to play hard. And Kansas has not been losing games for the most part because of their defense. Their defense has actually played pretty well this year,
right? For
the most part. It's their offense that hasn't been doing very well. Been yanking of quarterbacks, various quarterbacks being concussed at one point or another, or sometimes both at the same times. Once again, I thought the Broncos showed up with the wrong game plan on defense. What can Kansas do? Well, the only thing they can do is run the ball. Okay, let's just put nickel and dime packages on the field for the first half.
Yeah, that was bizarre. I couldn't believe the number of times I was seeing.
Understand.
And then finally, towards the end of the game, they started, loading up the box a bit, shutting down the edges better. But
even the announcers at the end were saying, well, it's pretty obvious if Jamal Charles is on the field, he's going to get the ball. It's like, yes, but that was true from the first play.
Right.
I don't understand. Again, it's the case where they treated Brady Quinn and the receiving core of the Kansas City Chiefs like they were a legitimate threat, and they clearly have not been this season.
Right.
I think you start off stopping the run, and if they pass successfully, then you have to come out of it. But that didn't happen. No. And quite frankly, KC lost this game because of the stupidity of their coaches again. Because you know what happened? Every third down play. This is something actually I dug up out of ESPN as well. They had 14 third down plays. Guess how many plays Jamal Charles had the ball? None. They didn't use him once on third down.
Are you serious?
Yeah. 14 tries on third down.
Outrage.
Yes.
That's ridiculous.
Well, that one time they got into the red zone, it was a third and short. It's somewhere about the middle-ish part of the game, maybe the start of the third. And it was a 3rd and 1, and they run that stupid trick play where they hand the ball off to the quarterback or the tailback, and the tailback tries to throw it to the quarterback on 3rd and 1.
Right.
After they had just marched it down the field.
Right.
What this game legitimately should have been 30-14 Chiefs. I just don't understand coaches sometimes.
Well, the other side of it is too. That changes a lot of things in my mind. I was largely chalking up their lack of success to really some mind-numbingly stupid penalties on Kansas City's part. I mean, like in the third quarter, there was that one bit of play there, that stretch where it seemed like for 5-10 minutes they were just, they might as well have popcorn and barca loungers out in the middle of the field.
You could have watched another football game inside of the football game while they were like that's like 5 penalties in a row. Yeah, that was just a weird.
But the thing about it is, at that point, Kansas City was marching down the field, and they were having some success. I mean, if they had put one more touchdown on the board, it would have been a different game.
Absolutely.
And so, again, I've got to say, Kansas City, you guys played your hearts out, but you shot yourself in the foot too. I mean, you took your shoe off. Excuse me. It'd be nice if I could speak. And you use a scope, and you're shooting at your foot, and you're missing.
But I'm not going to blame the players on this one. This is completely coaching. So you take you got a guy who ends up with 23 rushes for 107 yards, and every time you get in a third down play, you're like, well, who do we go to? Oh, let's just pick some random person.
Right.
Yeah, and so what ends up happening, you end up converting 3 of 14, kills your drives, you stack on penalties on top of that, and that's Kansas City in a nutshell.
Right.
How do you fix that? You got to start firing coaches.
Well, yeah, I think Romeo Cornell is out. He's got to be. I mean, he's
sure. No, good.
Well, I was just going to say though, for me, of course, being a Broncos fan, this game raised a lot of questions. I already talked about the concern I had over the way they were adjusting against the Kansas City secondary. I'm also wondering what the hell was going on with some of the penalties, particularly like with Woodyard. And that ridiculous bit of play in that mix.
Selfish play in football. That shows you that football, even though you end up running about 120-ish offensive plays a game, 120 plays are run basically. One selfish play can turn the game around. It's the ultimate team sport, but an individual can doom you. And he almost did. That was a 3rd and 1. The ball was clearly dropped in front of him. The receiver is standing by the side judge, and he just runs up to it and headbutts him.
Yeah.
For no reason. I mean, literally zero reason. There was no chance that was an accidental thing, where, I didn't know if he caught the ball or not. Even if the guy caught the ball, that would have been an automatic penalty. At the time, I was thinking, my God, what are you thinking?
And the funny thing about it is that as boneheaded as that was, he also was the best defensive player on the field. I mean, he had the most tackles. He, garnered a sack. He had 3 plays for a loss of yards.
And the funny thing was that none of that would have mattered if the Chiefs had gone on to win that game and had converted points on that series.
Yeah,
that's all people would remember. Just like that 4th and 29 with the Chargers. That's the thing about football. You can be no matter how much of a hero you are for 59 minutes and 59 seconds, 1 second of dumb dooms your team.
Well, somebody else two other people that I'd like to call out. Holiday. Yeah. What a brilliant day for him. Mm-hmm. He's turning out to be the best thing we've ever had on special teams. I can't think of anybody who's created more excitement on special teams than him.
He has definitely picked up a lot of yards, and that's been good for us. We've had a hard time sustaining drives. So if we start 30, 40, 50-yard line, then the fact that we only convert half our 3rd downs may not necessarily hurt us. At least we can get the field goal range, that kind of thing. And those are the little tiny things that give you those little bit of extra points in the long run.
Well, another guy I'd like to call out is Raheem Moore. He's a safety, and as a safety, I think he is as good on the rush defense as he is on the pass defense.
Sure, he did a very good job.
He comes up there and really, and you know what? He's a hell of a hard tackler too. I mean, I've seen some guys that probably had to visit their dentist afterwards, to get their fillings put back in.
Actually, there is one guy I want to talk about because I have said nothing but bad things about this guy for years, and that's Marino.
Yeah.
In fact, the in-house joke here is no show Marino,
right? Which
we didn't come up with, but it's stuck. The man would hit a tackler, hit a blade of grass, trip over a shoestring, and he'd fall down, and then he'd get hurt.
Right.
Consistently. I don't know what happened this football game. I don't know what was said to him or whether he feels like this is his last legitimate chance to either play.
Which it is.
It really is, actually, honestly, to play in the football league. But he came out, he played like he has never played professional football before. I've seen every game that guy's played. And this, far and away, is better than all of his other games put together.
Absolutely. I always talk about McGahee and the fact that, he's always churning his feet, right? Mm-hmm. Well, Marino, this game, was churning his little feet. I mean, even when he was getting cut down behind the line of scrimmage, he was still churning his feet, and he reeled off some really powerful yards that required him breaking 1 or more tackles and going through cracks that he couldn't seem to find in the past.
Listen, when it was the 4th quarter late, we started deep in our territory, 6.5, let's say 7 minutes left on the clock.
Right.
And I'm like, well, most teams that have a running game will run out the clock this way. They will just slam it up the middle, and they'll convert just enough first downs to drive the game out of reach for their team. I'm like, we got Marino. Now, even as well as he had done, I was still like, I don't think he's got that kind of mojo when they're lining up against him. He converted a couple plays, got us first downs that won that game for us. So, speaking about hats off, man, that's a game that I think even if you never play football ever again, that's a great game to think about the rest of your life.
Well, you know what? Let it be said. We've been harsh on the guy, but we're also lavishing him with some necessary praise.
A well-deserved praise. So we slipped by, and I really think we got lucky. That game was Kansas City's to win at several different points.
Right.
Especially with Denver in the fourth quarter, just not playing at all. Like, I saw at least 3 drop passes in the fourth quarter. They just killed drive. There's some plays that I guess technically were Manning incompletions, but I just felt the receivers just wouldn't reach out for the ball or just work that extra yard to try to make the catch. We just couldn't get going in the fourth, which is unusual for us. But
the funny thing is that we actually had we're 7 of 14 on third down conversions, and yet I'm still left with a sense that the game was another example of an inability to sustain drives.
Yeah, I think those 7 of 14, I think 1 or 2 of those came at the very end. Right. That last drive we did. And we had one series where we scored a touchdown. We marched down the field. I think it's one of these things where we had 1 or 2 good series that probably accounted for 5. Mm-hmm. Of those third down conversions, right. But they all happened in a row. We got points out of that. So you take those off the table, and all of a sudden we're like 2 and 9 on third downs for the rest of the game.
And speaking of drop passes, I believe by my count there was a stretch in there where Manning was 0 for 5 on passes, mm-hmm. and he was 0 for 5 because everybody and his brother was dropping passes. I mean, people who normally could reel in crazy passes. So
it's true, and. That's a problem we've had pretty much all season long. All right, so this is as good a spot as any to jump into the standings for the AFC West. And, it's been interesting these last few weeks. We've been making these predictions and picks, and we've been talking about all these scenarios. But the one thing that's been very consistent in the last few weeks, Denver wins. Every other team loses.
That's true.
Every team has lost in the AFC West except for Denver. So basically it boils down to this. The Broncos win any one of the next 5 they're in. If the Chargers win everything, the Broncos lose everything, they're the AFC West champs. The Raiders have to win everything, and the Broncos have to lose everything, and then they have to win the tiebreaker against the Broncos.
See, and yeah.
As far as the wild card hunt is concerned, the Chargers are 3 back on the Colts, 2 back on the Steelers, and with only 5 games to play, that's tough because the other teams are probably going to win a couple of games. The Raiders are 4 back on the Colts and 3 back on the Steelers. Even the wild card hopes for the other teams that are still in contention are pretty dim at this point. I think the only team from the AFC West that's going to advance is going to be Denver.
Yeah. Yes, and as it should be. I mean, really, all 3 of those teams are a hot mess at this point.
Sure.
It would be really a sideshow curiosity, seeing a 3-legged dog or something.
Yeah, it's one of these things where it's like it's possible, but it has to be like raining on a Tuesday, and some movie has to be playing on HBO. I mean, it's just the things that have to line up for one of those 2 teams to get in at all. Either way, at this point, it's statistically very improbable.
All right, so let's talk about next weekend's picks.
Chiefs versus the Panthers. This is a case again of bad versus worse. And neither team can stop the run right now. KC can't pass right now, and I'm not so sure if that's that Quinn can't throw the ball as much as the coaching staff won't let him throw the ball. There's no trust in the passing game, but KC can run the ball, and I think that's going to be the difference. So, and the Panthers are a very streaky team. Sometimes they're really good, and sometimes they're really bad. And they came off a tough game last week, and did well. So this is gonna be a game where I'm gonna just say this: the home team's gonna win this one, but not by a lot. I think they'll go behind Jamal Charles 25, 30 times, punch in a couple touchdowns, and it'll be Chiefs 17-14.
17-14. I'm smiling right now because you and I went the same direction, except for slightly different reasons. I'm picking Carolina for 17, but Kansas City winning with 19. The thing that I see, I don't think they're going to get a lot of touchdowns. I think what's going to happen is that Jamal Charles, if they're smart, is going to get them within field goal range. And, they've got a good enough kicking staff that they can put in some field goals.
Okay, fair enough.
But, yeah, Cam Newton's having a bad time. Carolina, not a great team. Kansas City. If they're smart, they're going to be thinking about how close they came to beating one of the top teams in the league, the Broncos, and so I think they should be up.
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking.
If you're going to play, if they played a lot hard last week against the Broncos, there's no reason they shouldn't play hard against a team that really they should be able to put a W on.
Right.
So, Unless the Chiefs really want that number 1 pick and they start doing things like not running Jamal Charles on 3rd down.
Boy, it is funny, actually, the race for the bottom. For the top pick in the draft.
Sure. All right.
All right, so the Oakland-Cleveland game. I'm going to pick that game at 23 Oakland, 27 Cleveland. I think that's going to be a tight game. Now, you know what? This is going to be like Timmy and Jimmy having a crip fight in the parking lot as far as I'm concerned. Because basically these two teams have just horrendous defenses. I mean, they're in the lower tier of every defensive category. So whatever it is that Carson Palmer and whoever Cleveland's quarterback is, who I can't even think of, which is kind of the point, they'll produce something. They'll produce some points. The thing about for me with Oakland, though, is I think they're going to lose because Oakland has been a one-dimensional team all season, but Palmer is not even doing well now. I mean, with that quarterback rating that low, I don't think the team believes in him at all at this point. I don't think the offensive line is even working for him. So I really see them maybe cobbling together some loose points and that being about it.
Okay. It's this is bad versus worse. These are 2 bottom tier teams, aren't going anywhere this year. The Raiders' defense is awful. Luckily for them this week, the Browns' offense is statistically the worst in the league. So it's bad versus worse as far as the matchup. And you flip it around the other side, it's not quite as drastic as far as the difference between the two, but it's still pretty bad.
Right. So
Palmer can pass. They're at home. So I'm actually going to give the Raiders the edge on this one, 23-16. With bad teams, sometimes being at home helps. But otherwise,
Well, I think a lot of it's going to depend on which team hasn't given up on their entire season.
True.
And the only reason why I think right now that things are so bad for Oakland that they're on the verge of giving up.
Sure. This is definitely a pride game.
Yeah.
So the team that shows up with any pride at all.
Yeah. What do you do with a 3-8 record?
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah. You're just trying to play the string out basically at this point and move into next year. So
what do you think about the San Diego game?
So Chargers versus the Bengals. So this could be an interesting game. The Bengals are pretty hot. They played us tough, and they've been playing hard ever since. So. And they've been good on defense. Statistically, they're good on defense. And plus, just watching them, they're making a lot of plays. They hustle to the ball. On the flip side, San Diego hasn't been very bad in the last couple of weeks, but they haven't been terribly good either.
Right.
They've still been losing games. So again, I think from the Chargers' perspective, this is another pride game. I guess again the X factor is how long can Phillip Rivers be good? How long can he play before he starts getting frustrated again and starts throwing easy picks and making bad selfish decisions? And San Diego doesn't have an offensive line anymore. They've got 2 cheerleaders starting on the left side at this point. I mean, he gets sacked all the time. They can't run the ball because they don't have an offensive line. So I'm saying the Bengals are going to win this one 34-13, and Rivers will throw 2 picks. 2 selfish picks.
Wow. 2 selfish picks. Okay, so we got to hold him to that. Not just picks, but selfish picks. All right. That's funny. You know what? I'm going to take up Cincinnati at 31 and San Diego at 17. I think that Cincinnati's D is just good enough to really put some pressure on Phillip Rivers. I believe in Dalton, though, more than anything. Okay. I think Dalton has the ability to exploit.
You like that kid.
I
That's
do.
pretty good.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity for him, I think.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I mean, Ginger Power. Let's hear it for Ginger Power. All right. Last game to pick is going to be that Denver and against Tampa game.
Yep.
I am going to pick Denver for 34 points. I think that after being out in the wilderness with the offense, I think things are going to come back together. I'm hoping so.
Okay.
Let's put it that way. I think it's time, actually, for the Broncos to But because you know what, actually in the press you can hear some of players like there's some quotes from like Decker and Tammy and others who are saying, you know, things are not firing. Yeah, we won, we escaped from Kansas City, but you know there are questions now that are being raised. You also have the Denver Post folks talking about how they've got to get the offensive line running a little bit better, and but I think it's time for some things to start integrating, because you know what, now is the time for them to really be focusing on the playoffs. And so I'm hoping they put together 34. I know that they're capable of it. Tampa, on the other hand, Tampa's coming from being in that big swampy soupy mix of the NFC playoff picture, and while their position is kind of